We got it from eating a bat sandwich. It's bioengineering. I just wish somebody would. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, you know the deal. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. It really helps the algorithm so that more people will see these videos. Yes, we're back at it again. Dr. Fauci. I am, we're going to address a couple of things that he's said in the last few days that I found really interesting. One of which is he said people are confusing the guidance from the CDC. And I think he's wrong. I think it's not their misinterpretation. I think he's talked out of both sides of his mouth so many times that everybody's just confused and doesn't believe him. But let's jump into this real quick. All right. Anthony S. Fauci, the government's leading infectious disease expert, which really scares me. That in itself scares me because once he resigns or retires, I'm going to apply for this job because apparently all you do is watch the news and regurgitate it back a couple of days later. It's not based on any scientific knowledge he has. He's a doctor, got it. But that's what he's doing. You don't need a mask. You need a mask. You need two masks. Herd immunity is 50%. It's 60 to 70%. It's 80 to 90%. I'm so confused at this point. I really think I'm just going to guess, throw darts at whatever decision I'm thinking about with COVID and go from there. But I digress. I think people are misinterpreting, thinking that this is a removal of the mask mandate for everyone. It's not. He told Axios. It's an assurance to those who are vaccinated that they can feel safe, be they outdoors or indoors. That seems pretty simple, and that's basically the guidance everybody I know has taken from it. So I don't understand where the misinterpretation comes in, Dr. Fauci. Can you explain it to me? Or wait, better, don't, because you'll just confuse me again. With staying on the subject of Dr. Fauci, they're saying now he's hedging his bets about where the actual outbreak came from. It apparently did not come from the bat sandwich, as we were originally told, and it may have come from the bio lab in Wuhan. I thought that was a conspiracy. Isn't that what we were told months ago, that that was a conspiracy theory and QAnon and stuff like that? Oh, wait, maybe it did come from that lab in China. And now we need to do an investigation. And now President Biden has our intelligence services investigating it. Do you really think the Chinese are going to cooperate? I mean, honestly, come on, really? Why are we even bothering to talk about it that way? We know that there's probably a 99% chance it came from there. I do not think it was a deliberate leak. I'm not going to fall into that conspiracy theory. I think three workers from that lab were infected with something to the point that they had to be hospitalized. So there's a good chance that's where COVID came from. Now, months ago, he said it was naturally occurring. I listened to something. It was while my gym was closed. So it was probably April timeframe last year that it was an interview with somebody who was a microbiologist who said it didn't zoologically replicate, or it didn't replicate in a zoological manner, such as a naturally occurring disease does. Now, I'm no expert by any means. I'm not a biologist. I am not a doctor. But to me, the evidence has always been there that this was something that was bioengineered, not naturally occurring. So we'll see what the end of the results of the investigation are. I think the results from intelligence services, what of it is released, is going to be accusations, because they're not going to be able to put people on the ground in Wuhan to nail down exactly what happened and find patient zero. And there's no monkey like in a movie Outbreak that they're going to find. Now, here is what he said. I'm not convinced about that. I think we should continue to investigate what went on in China until we continue to find out, to the best of our ability, what happened. Well, I think we all pretty much know what happened. It's ridiculous to say it's anything else. So, Dr. Fauci, my hat is off to you for thoroughly confusing the shit out of everybody at this point. Because remember, let's go all the way back to the beginning of this. You don't need a mask because they're worried about a run on masks and first responders and medical personnel needed the safety equipment. Got it. To a point, that does make sense to me. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it does make sense to me as a logical way to do things. Not right, but it is what it is. Then herd immunity. Or wait, then it's naturally occurring. Then we went into the herd immunity discussion. Then we went to the, well, you need two masks. Well, you need a mask even after you've had the vaccine. Well, this, well, that, well, come on. I mean, I understand with the disease this new, it's going to take time to figure it all out. I get that. But stop claiming to be an expert on it and just admit that on TV, that it's so new, we're not even sure exactly what happens with it. Feeding into this pandemic, we're going to transition a little bit to another shooting a couple days ago in George Floyd Square. In fact, there was a live shot going on with a reporter when you could hear the shots in the background. Depending on which report you hear, it was somewhere between a dozen and 30 shots fired, which is quite a bit to fire in a city. If you're not a huge fan of, if you're somebody who shoots quite a bit, you understand how long it takes to fire 30 rounds inside a city. But let's go ahead and read out this. At George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, a few feet from where he was killed a year ago, just as the Day of Remembrance was about to start at 10 a.m. Tuesday, violence in this city was on full display. Shots rang out, sending scores of people scrambling for safety. Now, this is still, they call it an autonomous zone. In other places, they call them no-go zones because they do not allow the police in. And then they get upset and people want to sue the city because their child ends up dying and bleeding out because they're injured in one of these no-go zones, because EMS will not go in without a police escort, and I don't blame them. They don't get paid. They put themselves in enough danger on a regular basis to walk into it without protection that's offered by the police being with them. Now, Minneapolis is one of the cities that voted to defund the police. In fact, they're going to have their traffic enforcement is going to be done by unarmed officers. Well, I haven't seen the exact plan, but they're going to be unarmed. Now, my question is, are they going to have to meet the same qualifications as a sworn law enforcement officer? Because if they do, you already have a shortage of people that fit that. Do you really think they're going to want to walk up to a car unarmed and try to give somebody a ticket? And think about it from this standpoint. A normal traffic stop with an armed police officer, you don't know if the person you're stopping just committed an armed robbery, a murder, or some other violent crime. And you're sending somebody unarmed. No, thank you, sir. I'm not involved at all. And keeping on this violence and lowering police, oh, this is just the perfect storm. And when I found this article, it was perfect because they had a picture of the Chicago cops on it, which I find very interesting. In fact, underneath the picture, shooting at a party in the Chicago area leaves 13 people wounded and 2 dead. I remember pretty bad days in Iraq or Afghanistan where we didn't lose 13 wounded and 2 dead. So what does that say about Chicago? There's a reason they call it Chirac. But I'm going to read this paragraph, and then we're going to have a little discussion about this and what they call the perfect storm. And I'm going to add to it because it is important. Experts point to a perfect storm of factors: economic collapse, social anxiety because of the pandemic, depolicing in major cities after protests that call for abolition of police departments, shifts in police resources, and the release of criminal defendants pre-trial or before sentences were completed to reduce the risk of COVID-19. Now, we've had this discussion before, and I'm going to, if I remember to, I'm going to attach my video with a card, the one I did on violence in Chicago and some of these other cities, because I want you to understand some of the process. And now they're letting even more of these violent criminals out before they've served their time or prior to actually being sentenced for their crimes. And I firmly believe in innocent until proven guilty. But if you have a history of violent crimes, you're charged with another violent crime or a gun crime, and they're going to let you out. So you can go out and prey on people. In fact, the last time I looked up the stats in Chicago alone, Up to, I think it's 30% of gun violence is committed by people that are currently out on bond from another violent charge or a gun charge. So keep that in mind. Now, just to highlight a few of the cities involved in these rising crime rates. In Chicago, homicides are up 33% in the first 3 months of the year compared to 2020, while shootings are up nearly 40% for the same period. In New York City, the NYPD data shows murders jumped by nearly 14% through March 28th. The latest numbers the department has made public, while shootings were up nearly 50%. Now, remember, there's a video out there of a woman walking up to another one and shooting her right in the head on its street in New York City. So think about that. That's what we're dealing with. You defund your police. Police in these cities that there were already shortages of law enforcement across the country to begin with. And then you take these cities like Chicago, Portland, New York City, you start defunding completely or cutting budgets for these departments. They're going to let officers go, or the officers are going to resign and go to places where they actually can protect and serve citizens. So this perfect storm, the economic collapse happened because people pushed issues that didn't need to be pushed. And now people don't want to go back to work. And I understand if you don't want to work for minimum wage, but traditionally there's been times that's where you started until you learned a skill, finished school, and got a better job. This violence is not going to get better. None of the policies that are running around now are going to make it better. Letting violent criminals out of jail and prison early is not going to make it better because we don't have the programs in those places to give them skills they need when they get out to actually accomplish anything else. They come out better criminals than when they went in. And like I said, in my video in Chicago, we went through some of the processes they use in a prosecutor's office to either knock down the seriousness of the crime or to throw it out altogether so they can cook their stats and make themselves look better. And now that's all coming back to haunt them. I mean, just think about that. At one party, 12 people shot, 2 dead. In fact, I may start doing that as my shorts once or twice a week and just bringing up these stats from Chicago alone or from St. Louis because I live here in Missouri. Now, Jen Psaki said, we don't have a crime problem. We have a gun problem. Well, let's talk about this. Crime rates are up in New York City, Chicago, and LA. We'll just use those as examples. They have very strict gun laws, super strict gun laws. Whereas Missouri has open carry. And yes, I'm a huge Second Amendment fan. I have no problem with training requirements before people are allowed to buy guns. In fact, I think that'd be a good idea. But there's crime, but it's nothing like in places like Chicago or LA or New York City where gun control is crazy. But these same politicians that vote for these laws and vote to defund your police, the one thing that the people in these cities have to protect them is their police. Because most of them cannot afford to go through the licensing process to own guns. So they have the police. Well, now they don't have the police because their budgets are being cut. They're resigning, which leads to more crime. Who couldn't see this happening? And it's not the gun's fault. The gun doesn't shoot itself. It takes somebody to shoot it. So let's stop talking about gun control. Let's start talking about crime control. And I don't mean some sweeping criminal justice bill like the 94 crime bill that our current president was the author of, which has led to more people of color being incarcerated than any other point in our history and is still causing issues. Let's repeal that. Let's come up with some real programs inside these institutions, starting in juvenile detention centers up through adult prisons, to try to give them skills when they get out so they have something else to look forward to. I don't think it's asking for too much. I think it's what we actually need to do as a society if we want to start ending this. The problem with it is this is a 10, 15, 20, 25-year project, and it's going to be expensive. And that money's got to come from somewhere, because I don't think most of our social welfare systems are bad. I think they're horribly managed because people are lazy. I was a state employee. I saw it. There are people who are lazy managing these programs. And if we manage them more effectively, then we can start to see a break in the cycle because people would have skills. They'd be able to go out there and get jobs that pay well. Well, that's all I have this evening, folks. Please like, share, subscribe. That really does help with the algorithm. If you don't like what I have to say, then go ahead and hit dislike. Tell me why in the comments. Everybody